would be so different.
All right,
We probably wouldn't even be on the radio here. Go ahead.
This device that you just talked about, that you just described, how did you and your buddy endeavor to measure its energy output, and in what form? How did you take a look at it?
Well, like I was describing, the first time I saw it operating, all he had to do was put the lid, the semisphere, on top of this device, and it became operational. And he said, just put your hand on the top of it. And when I did, I could not touch it. It was the exact sensation of taking two like-pole magnets and trying to push them together.
Wow.
But it was just my hand approaching a metal sphere. Now, that in itself is shocking, because there's nothing that can do that.
In other words, you felt a repelling force, as in like a wall? I mean, you just could push on it?
I could push, starting from probably about a foot away. I could begin to feel something, and as I got closer, it got more intense, and probably at 2 to 3 inches, it was impossible to make contact with it. And you could push on the top, your hands would slide to the bottom. It was a very intense field, and he had a golf ball there, and we even something moving at high speed could not penetrate the field. This was the basic gravity wave that the system produced.
Did you determine it to be a 360-degree field?
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't?
It wasn't. And again, that's something else. It's a completely directional gravity field only on the skin of the hemisphere.
Oh, my.
And it didn't appear on the base at all. And so this alone was just absolutely mind-boggling, because here's a machine doing the impossible. The next thing that I was shown, and it couldn't be a magic trick. It's my hand approaching a metal sphere. There's no room for any question there.
And what did you and your buddy discuss at that point? I mean, you obviously asked questions, or he offered information, or he just said...
Well, this was the initial introduction to what was going on, and I mean, you could see it in his eyes. He took pride in showing off what they had, because the next thing he showed me was connecting it to the amplifier, and he said, "You want to see something really neat now?"
Yeah.
As if that wasn't amazing. There is, how am I going to describe this? There's a fitting, almost like a pipe, that slides down and makes contact with the hemisphere.
Okay.
This apparently, from what was described to me, is a tuned pipe. Almost like
resonant
waveguides are tuned for microwaves to pass through.
Would be resonant.
Exactly. So once this pipe is placed upon the hemisphere, the field completely disappears. So that's giving you evidence that it's now traveling through the waveguide. The waveguide goes to another extremely large tube, probably about 2 feet in diameter, 4 feet long, and has plates, I guess is the best way I can describe it, on the outside. This is actually the emitter, the gravity emitter. There's something in between the two, which is the actual amplifier.
Hold it right there, Bob. We're at the bottom of the hour. Once again, here's Bob Lazar. And by the way, he's not in Las Vegas anymore, I don't think. Bob, you're somewhere else now, aren't you?
The mountains of New Mexico.
Back to New Mexico, huh?
Yeah.
Cool. That's a nice place to be, yeah. All right. What you were describing, the first thing you were describing that you saw, that was obviously a driver. Well, in broadcasting, it would be the driver unit, the generator itself.
Right.
And now you're starting to describe what terrestrials would regard as waveguide, or whatever carries this energy to some kind of amplifier, huh?
Exactly. However, if I can take 1 second and just step back to the hydrogen thing, the only reason I'm saying this is because, I guess because of the show.
Sure.
There are 1 million people hitting my United Nuclear website and asking me to post some kind of instructions about.
I told you.
Yeah, so I'm going to go, there's no way I can answer all the emails, so I'll go ahead and generate a web page about that. So.
Well, you could either do that or give out your home phone number.
Yeah, I'd rather do the web page.
Okay.
So there'll be some information up there eventually.
Thank you on behalf
of. Got to give me some time to do that.
On behalf of the millions out there, yes.
Back to the reactor.
Right.
Or the propulsion system. Anyway, the way it was configured was supplying the basic wave, the basic gravitational wave, to the amplifier and to the emitter. In the craft, there are 3 emitters.
3.
In a triad pattern. Uh-huh. And what I found interesting is, after being involved with the project, that kind of made me start looking into UFO stories to see what's true and what's not.
Yeah, sure.
And there were so many stories, especially rash of Belgian sightings in the early 90s, I think, or middle 90s, where they saw on the bottom of the craft 3 bright spots of light.
Right.
And that is exactly how this operated. Another interesting thing was, I know I'm jumping ahead of myself here, but the other craft that were there all had the same power and propulsion system in it.
All 3 emitters?
Yeah, which I found really interesting in itself, which means that whatever civilization made these, it's almost as if there's, it sounds crazy, but a factory that's producing these and subbing out their propulsion systems for different models of crafts. I mean, it almost sounds like a car.
That's how we do it.
But it was the identical system in all crafts.
All right. Now he demonstrated the amplifier to you.
Yes, that was the reason he connected up the reactor.
How was the amplifier demonstrated? In other words, what further did you see when he brought the amplifier online?
When he fired that up, he took an ordinary candle and put it probably about 6 feet in back of the emitter. And I was waiting for things to get started, but he really didn't do anything, at least that I saw. And went over and looked at the candle, and the flame was no longer flickering. It was essentially frozen the way it was.
Frozen?
Yeah. The candle was there, and the flame was like a 2-dimensional picture of it.
Oh, my God.
I mean, the flame wasn't moving, but it was still emitting light.
Which means?
Well, it could mean all kinds of things. It's just another thing that is bizarre. That you really can't. I mean, how in the world would you do that?
Now, wait a minute. Now, we know, don't we? Physicists know that gravity bends and affects.
Oh, absolutely.
Light.
I'm saying, but without using gravity, how could you do that?
You couldn't.
Yeah, exactly.
So, within that field, it froze to your eyes. It froze that image.
Right to my eyes.
Solid.
The candle was removed, and to show me how the emitters can focus gravity, because this is very crucial to how they operate. They must be able to focus and diverge the gravitational wave.
Uh-huh.
Apparently, he set it for a tight focus and increased the power to it, and at the focal point, which was at that time probably about 3.5 to 4 feet from the rear of the emitter,
right,
a black dot formed, a black ball, not a black hole where it's going to suck in the desks and things there.
Yeah.
What he was showing me was the fact that light was being bent. Now, there is nothing that we have that can do that.
That would have been at the focal point. Now, for example, with a satellite dish, a lot of people know about satellite dishes.
A parabolic dish.
That's right. Out at a certain point, which is the focal point, on a good dish, it's about the size of a quarter or even smaller. That's what's called the focal point, where all the energy from that satellite dish is radiated right to that little tiny spot, and that's where they put the collector, or the LNA or LNB, to get the signal. And that's a focal point. So you're saying, just like that, at the focal point, but out in the middle of nothing, in the middle of air, there was a black dot.
Right, and that he was demonstrating the fact that the device was bending light away from the area. I mean, it was a completely black dot.
Yeah.
Later to find out, well, I don't want to jump ahead of myself, but anyway, there were a couple small demonstrations like that were extremely impressive, and this is what we were supposed to be working on. And, our mission was really not just to find out how it worked, but the aim of the project was to see if these systems and subsystems can be duplicated with Earth